And I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Toby Jepson. How you doing, man?
I'm all right, Lee. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure to have you back on, mate. Always good to chat with you. Obviously, previously been chatting about, obviously Wayward Sons records and tours and everything else. This time around, a brand new solo release for you, with Lookout Volume One, which comes out this Friday as we sit here, the 8th of November. Um, Great themes on the album, mental health and everything else. What made you want to put that out in such a public domain? Obviously, even mental health in any aspects, quite a personal journey for a lot of people. And I can understand it coming out in art because that's how a lot of people express themselves. But why did you think it was important to, share this one with the world?
It's a very good question. I think really my personal journey from Little Angels days right through to where I am now has been kind of an extraordinary curve. Suffer. I mean, it's hard to put it into words, I guess. Really, I think men especially aren't very good at mental health. I think that's one of the big things I realised. A lot of my friends that have suffered excruciating difficulties to do with struggles they've had in their lives, and then in a lot of respects, the kind of their inability to deal with it, has a big influence on it. And when I kind of had to face some pretty dark things, demons that happened to me, that happened to me at school. I mean, mine's all to do with being badly bullied at school, psychological bullying that then sadly was kind of continued as a professional person with other people. I didn't realize how deeply it had affected me, and it has affected me in such a way that it's kind of in some crazy way. It's been a sort of one of the real things I've clung on to. A lot of my songs, certainly from the past, I would say. If you look at Little Angels, things like Kicking Up Dust, Johnny Never Get About Nobody, that character's me. Don't Pray for Me, the character in Don't Pray for Me is me. I don't think I would have admitted that at the time, but really, in lots of ways, it was me trying to examine the reason why I felt like I did, this kind of need to want to escape and try and figure stuff out and prove myself, which was driven by a feeling of a kind of uselessness, really, which is because that's what happens to you when you get badly bullied. You
Yeah,
make you feel like you don't exist. So it was a kind of crazy time because then, of course, from that point on, all of those songs are the reason why I became a successful musician. So there's this sort of strange dalliance with why are these messages making sense? How do I value them? What am I going to acknowledge from this, etc. And of course, eventually it comes home to roost. And rather than sort of keeping it to myself, because I've always put myself out there on my music. I mean,
yeah,
the Toby and the Whole Truth record was very much a kind of an examination of quite a dark period for me. The end of the band and the sadness that was associated with that, and the sort of anger and the vitriol. I mean, when I listen to that record these days, it's quite hard for me to listen to it really because I was pretty angry. But I've never shied away from that, Lee. It's been something I felt that is a strength rather than a weakness. I think if you're going to be artistic, you better be damn sure that you can be authentic and be real and be truthful and honest about it. I mean, I know a lot of artists out there don't believe these things, that they believe they just purely there to entertain. But for me, it's an absolute combination of entertaining without frivolity. I want there to be a reason. I want there to be a message. I want to discuss things. I want to sort of enter the conversation, the world conversation about the human sort of journey. It's important to me that. So I think all of those things combined, given the fact I've been through quite a lot of therapy in the last couple of years to sort of face all of these difficult things, I sort of came out the end of that feeling inspired and feeling that I needed to say something about it, and I didn't want people to feel alone because I know there are a lot of people that I've spoken to, over the years, and especially I was out touring in the spring doing acoustic shows, and I'd made a very vocal point about saying that this music that's coming is going to be about my mental health struggles, and I was going to talk about it from the stage. And it's astounding the amount of conversations I then had with people that had suffered very similar things, didn't know how to deal with it, were stuck in this kind of cycle of despair, but were seemingly holding perfectly normal jobs, perfectly normal lives. So I think there is a kind of, it's like an iceberg. We are only seeing the tip of the iceberg with modern mental health problems. And if I can help in any way, shape, or form just by discussing it and being willing to discuss it, then I think that's important. For me, it is. It might not be for others. I'm sure there are people shy away from it and think, God, wish Jepson would keep his mouth shut and just get on with the music. But I can't think like that. I have to think about how I want to pursue my life, and I hope that it makes a difference. Yeah.
Well, I think it certainly does, mate. I mean, being honest with you, I met you obviously a few times up and down along the years and that, but I'm currently going through CBT therapy myself and dealing with some things myself. So this collection of works has really come at a time for me where I can really relate to it. And I think like any good songwriting, once you're going through similar experiences, you're always going to put, I'll put my experiences onto the lyrics and stuff. But on tracks like One Track Mind, where you say it's a memory of someone you used to be, I mean, that just hit it home all the way for me. I think you obviously having gone through your own sort of personal journey. I think anyone who's going through anything or reflecting and trying to make sense of stuff will really find a place on this album where they can relate to it because it is so open and honest.
Well, that's great to hear because that's the full intention. I've never felt you know to be artistic in any form at all. I don't care what it is, whether it's acting, painting, whatever. Being a musician, I just believe that you have to be brave. I think you've got to be brave enough to say what you really feel because it's not enough for me just to go out and leap around on a stage and shout daft words. I want it to mean something. It might not mean everything to everybody, but you're never going to do that. But what you might do is you might connect with somebody and that might then feel that they're not alone. And I don't mean this to sound mawkish and kind of over sentimental because I really don't mean it like that. But it's a very isolating feeling to go through the depression of a mental health struggle because it seats itself in that hollow space of despair where you feel that no one is even seeing you, and it's hard to talk about it, and you don't know how to talk about it. And even the closest people to you don't know why you're feeling like, what I mean? It's a whole gamut of problems, and I think to use the art, to use the music to express these things, and to say you're not alone. This is very common. Was absolutely foremost in my mind. And actually, I've got to say, I couldn't help myself. It was impossible to stop it. Once I started writing these songs, it came out of me without breaks on, and it was simply there in front of me. And I take that as a kind of an indicator that I'm doing the right thing. In all honesty.
I think all art in its finest form when it is open and honest and true is like that, mate. My wife Jo, she's an artist. She does lots of paintings and portrait work, and she's done a lot of pieces around mental health and stuff. And I don't know when she's been, battling her demons, she won't mind me saying that flows into her artwork. And I just think it's a natural thing to happen. And I think with this record, I think stereotypically, for anyone who might not have experienced the battles with mental health, it would be very easy to them to hear the subject and think, all right, this is going to be a really negative record. It's going to be a really dour record. It's not. It's a really empowering record. It's a really powerful piece. Tracks like Alone With You, the sort of lead single that you've left off with it, has a great energy about it. And I think that's really important to sort of reiterate. It's not a woe is me record. It's not a dour side of the tracks. It is a powering through kind of empowering album. That's what I got from it anyway.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you feel like that because that was the whole thing. Someone said to me earlier on today in another interviewer said, it's your message that you put out the front of the CD it seems like a contradiction because you're saying this is about my mental health struggles, but yet all of the songs are some of the most joyous you've ever written. I said, well, therein lies the rub. That it's what this record is about recovery. It's an album of recovery. It is an acknowledgement of the fact that I've been through these things and I've started to find my way out now. And there's a very important message there. I've started to find my way out because mental health issues, they don't ever go, but I think what they do is they reduce the more that you acknowledge them and the more that you face them and the more you talk about them and the more you come to terms with them. And so it's about a kind of it's a battle in a way to find your way into a better life, and I certainly feel that. I feel like I'm on the first few rungs of a ladder of a far more enjoyable life, far more honest. Is a lot honest with myself because I think half the problem with suffering mental health issues is that you're not very honest with yourself because you're holding it away, you're holding it inside. You know, you're not talking about it. You're trying to ignore it. You're trying to put it away. It exacerbates the issue because, you know, so these songs are a way of saying, look, it is possible. You know, it's not easy, but you've got to at the very least acknowledge the problem, face it head on, and you'll find a route out. You know, and it was important. And these are you know, this is the way the songs came out. I didn't anticipate this in lots of ways. It sort of just happened, and I think and I think that's the joy of it, really, actually, because it's sort of out of my control. And that therein lies the kind of real the power of it, is that music and the energy of music, the energy of art is something that's very, very hard to figure out and to control if you're in touch with yourself, if you like. So yeah, and I'm very pleased with the energy of it. I think there is it is uplifting, and I want people to be uplifted by it, but there's a very, you know, important and serious message at the heart of it all.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking there earlier about how, you know, your mental health has been, you know, quite a long process for you. But you've been therapy for the last couple of years and gone through that. The writing period of this, does it go back to sort of quite way back, or has it been since the therapy that these particular tracks have been written?
Very interesting question, and I think it's a kind of two-part answer. I started thinking about making this solo record when me and my wife went away on a we did list at 6 months of travel,
Yeah.
and that was part of my recovery. Really, we both had to get away and do something, and we wanted to, and it was very much part of that relearning experience, if you like, us reconnecting as people, and a bit of voyage of self-discovery whilst traveling, etc. And I started thinking about I needed to do something then. And when I got back from the trip, I started looking at my phone, because basically I don't tend to do demos. What I tend to do is if I write an idea, I'll bung it on my, you know, my voice notes on my phone and leave it on there. And I've dipped into that well many times. I've got 400 or 500 little clips on there, some of which I've used a number of times to inspire me to write something. So I went back to that well, and it was an unmitigated disaster. It just didn't work. I started writing stuff and it felt dry and empty and uninvolving and uninteresting. And I worked with Dave Kemp at the time, my co-writer. I've written a lot of stuff with, and we did a load of demos, basic demos. And I rang him up and I said, "Look, Dave, this record ain't happening. I'm not feeling this at all." And it was suddenly in a blinding flash moment of blinding flash. I sort of thought the reason why it is because that's the old me. That's the
Yeah, a
old
different
stuff.
headspace.
It's gone. All
Yeah.
that time, all those things that have invested in those ideas no longer matter. And so as soon as I knew, I sort of had that revelatory that moment. I started writing, and I wrote the whole of this record in 3 weeks. I was up
Wow.
I literally from there's only one song which is on this record, "Throw It Away," which was left over from anything. And that was a song I was going to put towards Wayward Sons, but for some reason or other, I don't quite know why, but it didn't feel right. So the rest of it was written. I was literally doing 12-hour days, and I couldn't stop the writing process. It was like I couldn't turn the tap off, you know. So I wrote 20 songs. I mean, and when I got to 20, I thought I'm going to have to stop. This is, you know, I don't know how much further I can go on with this. And actually, weirdly, it did sort of kind of grind to a halt. You know, it's sort of like, in fact, actually, one of the tracks on this record, "What Will It Take," was one of the very last things I wrote, and then it just sort of dried up. And I thought, no, that's an indication that I've got to the end of this journey with the writing process. So yeah, very quick, 3 weeks. I mean, that's quite unusual for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really quick to, obviously it was, like you say, flowing out of you there, mate. It was obviously a very quick process for you.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but but across these six tracks there on this particular collection, from that writing process anyway, it's still really eclectic, and all your albums have been pretty eclectic. You always had some sort of heavier stuff like "Alone with Me" that we were talking about. I mean, but across six tracks, I mean, stereotypically, you might think they might be more compact in their kind of stylistic way, especially within such a short writing period.
Mm.
Did you feel because this was coming under, you know, a solo release rather than it be under Wayward Sons or any sort of band title? Obviously, I know you write with Dave Kemp all the time. That just allowed you just to go with whatever was feeling, or was it because your mind was freer, because you were in a healthier place that you just felt like exploring?
I think a bit of both, really. You know, the Toby and the Whole Truth banner has been important, really, because it allows it to be a project, but
Mm.
it's not necessarily attached it directly to me, and I think there is a kind of, it's a good to sort of have that slight separation. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I've done a lot of stuff under my own name,
Yeah.
which in some respects I've struggled with, really, because it's a sort of strange bedfellow that, well, is this really me? Is this what I should, but with Toby and Whole Truth, because it's a kind of, like I say, a little step away, it allows for that kind of freedom. But I think one thing I would say about this record, it's a love letter to, there's a couple of things. It's definitely a love letter to a lot of stylized things I love in music. My household when I was a kid, I grew up with my dad. My dad was massively into soul music and
Yeah.
Northern soul, as well as loving Queen and Eagles. He had a big, wide sort of taste in music. My mum was into, Carole King and sort of Ella Fitzgerald and all this stuff. And my sister was into punk rock, and I was into hard rock, and all these things melded together. And I was massively influenced also by the post punk period of British music, which is if push is my favorite period of music. And so all of these things combined, I've never really felt I needed to bracket anything. I've never believed in the concept that, oh, it's just hard rock, it's just this, it's just that. I've never really recognized that. But of course, when you get into projects like Little Angels or Wayward Sons, they have very defining sounds. They're a thing, so you kind of get a little bit hemmed in with that. But with my solo stuff, I just thought this time, no, it's a love letter to all of the people I love, the Beatles, David Bowie. It's the soul stuff, the wall of sound, all that kind of thing. And so I took each song in turn, and I just thought to myself, is it going to take to deliver this song? And I didn't care what instruments it was. I didn't care what style we approached it with. And that was the process, was like, what does it need to deliver this tune? What is going to satisfy my demands on this song? And that's what I did. And there are a lot of different instruments on this record, lots of different approaches. But because it's me singing it and I've written everything, I do think there is clearly a kind of collective, sort of trail running through it all. But yeah, but it's the freest record I've ever made. I've never felt quite so empowered by the freedom of it. Definitely.
I mean, the string and piano arrangement on What Will It Take is just stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had some great help. I mean, believe me, it's the guys I've had around me are just absolutely extraordinary. The guy that did all the string arrangements for me. Well, me and Dave kind of came up with a concept for what we wanted with the strings, but of course we're not string arrangers, and so we brought in this guy George Hall, who was in a Yorkshire band called Zoot and the Roots years ago. He was the Hammond player, and George is just an absolute genius. He's one of these quietly spoken gentlemen who just gets on with the job, and everything he does is brilliant.
Yeah.
So he's been instrumental in parts of this record. Same with Dave. I mean, Dave's a brilliant all-round musician, and
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
course, that's what you do. That's what making records is. You are the sum of the parts. I might be the writer, but I need people to bring the songs alive. And I think the band all the guys that have played on this record have been absolutely superb. Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. It's always great to hear you and Dave working together. How is Dave? Because obviously I know you obviously a few years back now he pulled away from
Yeah.
Wayward Sons with his own health. How's he keeping with everything?
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he had some struggles of his own, but he's back on full form now. I mean, I literally spoke to him yesterday about various things we're having to do, because we're in the process of making the second. We're still in the middle of making the second record, for this collection, and that's what I'm enjoying about it. It's evolving, it's changing. We're redoing things, we're re-examining things, and he's coming down to replay some keyboards for me in a hopefully all being well in a few weeks' time. So it's an ongoing process, and but yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle for him. He had some health scares, but yeah, back on top form, and yeah, and long may it rain. That's what I say.
Absolutely. It's good to hear that he's back on form, mate. It really is. Had a great chat when you guys played Stone Dead Festival, and I was watching backstage and had a great chat with Dave then. So it's good to know that he's doing well.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the other collections. Is the mental health thing running through all the rest of the other collections that will sort of come out when they're ready? Is it, or is it different stages?
No, it's pretty much the central theme, but of course, offshooting from that central theme is how I overcame it. And I think, or how I'm overcoming it. I mean, a big part of the examination of this is what I've done is I've part of the realization is those that are the closest to me that have helped me the most. My relationship with my wife, we're 30 years married, and how much that the impact of her care and attention and her love has helped keep me together, and acknowledging that and valuing that and cherishing it, that's very much part of the story here, and also not my friends, family, etc. And acknowledging that, and bringing that into the process, because I've realized, and again, I don't want to sound too mawkish about this stuff, but I've realized that really, ultimately, it's being loved and loving other people that is the thing that's the only things that matter in life, ultimately. And from that wellspring, everything comes, and I think I've been incredibly lucky to meet the people I have, and my family and my kids and all the rest of it. And I think I didn't quite realize what an impact that had on me, because the music business is unrelenting. Apart from the things I've been struggling with on a personal level, it's an unrelenting business. You're constantly away. You're constantly, in meeting other people, in weird environments, weird situations. You're in a bubble most of the time. And so when you do come home, that grounding is really important. And I think I've taken that. I think I've taken, that for granted a lot of the time. And so it's kind of those things. It's an admittance of fault. It's a kind of recognition of people's help and love and care, and it's also sort of forgiving myself for it. I think a lot of mental health is actually forgiving yourself and being able to sort of stand up and go, well, okay, I might have made some mistakes there, but actually I've done my best, and and I need to acknowledge that, because I think a lot of the time we don't. So it's a multifaceted conversation, I think, really.
Yeah. I mean, you did mention earlier, obviously, that you and your wife, you took those 6 months and you went away and had some time reconnecting with yourselves and reconnecting and like with your own self. Do you think that you would have been able to do that had you, for want of a better term, stepped off the treadmill of touring album cycles with, Wayward Sons and other projects? Or do you think you actually absolutely needed that space and that getaway for that sort of clarity?
Very good question. Hard to answer. I think my life. I'm a lifer in this industry. I've been in it 40 years and nearly pretty much. I mean, I was 18 when I turned professional. I'm 57, so it's nearly 40 years. And it becomes a treadmill. I've had moments where I've been away from it. I spent a bit of time. I ran a building firm for a while. But I was still doing music. Uh, I ended up in the film industry for 2 or 3 years, but I still did music. I get dragged back into it, and then you're back on the trail. And it is that thing where what else do you know? What else you doing? Can I maximize this? How do I make the most of this situation? But it does feel like madness a lot of the time. The old adage of doing the same thing over and over again, and all that sort of stuff, equates to madness and expecting a different result and all that. But the way I feel about it is that that it, I can call myself a professional musician or a professional artist. I'm still here doing it, and that's because I've never stopped. And so taking the foot off the gas was quite a risk, really. But it just reached an impasse. I started my therapy, and I got to a point where it was just like, I cannot do this any longer. I can't listen to these conversations. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. It felt very, very difficult. I think the whole thing with the lockdown and COVID, that whole period, was incredibly difficult for us all. And I think it heightened and focused all of the anxieties that I had. And so when I reached that point, it was like, I have to do something different. We have to get away from this. And it's the best thing I ever did. I think it's the best thing both of us ever did. We talk about it every day. We want to do it again, But that kind of reconnecting, it's quite an extraordinary experience, stepping off a plane in Bangkok, and all of a sudden you find you're in this entirely different environment, and it's like, oh my God, we're only a month away from Christmas and we're in this kind of crazy world of I just didn't anticipate, and you get 3 weeks in and you realize it's not a holiday. You're actually traveling. You're not going home for 6 months. It was quite something. And we did it on a total shoestring budget. Believe me, it was not 5 star. We sort of found our way around, and just did the best we could. But I would recommend it to anyone. I mean, I know it's a massive privilege, and of course it is. But yeah, it was a huge journey of discovery, and one that I cherish and value enormously, and it set me on a course of, right, things have got to change. I've got to move forward. You know, what do I really want to do in my life? How do I want to present myself? How am I going to do that? And Lookout is very much part of that. You know, the result of that thought process.
Nice one, man. I mean, I know you and Dave did your acoustic shows earlier this year, but are you planning to tour this record in any capacity next year at all?
I hope so. I mean, it'll just depend on really how the record is received in general. I mean, you know, we're so far so good. We're a week and a half into the campaign, and you know, it seems to be going down great. You know, people haven't really heard much of the music. I think we only released the download 2 or 3 days ago. I think it might be Friday. So, you know, if people are getting used to the music. I'm hoping that that will inspire people to perhaps people that have been sitting on the fence to maybe go and have a listen, that sort of thing. But I don't take any take any you know, I don't believe I've got any right to anything, you know. I think it's the proof of the pudding has to be in the listening, you know what I mean? You know, and all the rest of it. And so, you know, we did this first sort of pre-order, and it came to a close because me and me and Rob, my partner in the business, we couldn't handle any more than that. You know, we just wanted to do a pre-order over you know, a reduced period of time. But we are going to put it back on sale, I think, in a week or two. So, you know, those that perhaps have heard it will be able to get their hands on it, sort of thing. You know.
Nice one. So what's the timeline? Do you have a timeline in mind for like the rest of the songs to be released, or are you just taking a bit more relaxed approach on that and seeing, you know, when they're ready and going from there?
Yeah, a bit of a relaxed approach, I think. I mean, like I say, I'm in the middle of completing the second one at the moment. We're about halfway through that. Having this back injury hasn't helped. You know,
Yeah.
so I'm just, I can't sit at my I can't sit at my desk at the moment. So it's but that's okay. You know, you know, I'm not bothered about the time. I want this to be right. I'm
Yeah.
very pleased with the way the first one's turned out. I'm excited about the second one. I think there's a couple of belters on the second one. Well, I like it all, but I think there's one particular song I think that I played live on the acoustic tour this year, that went down great live, and that one's going to be on this next record. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited, but it's ready when it's ready. That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what does the remainder of the year and into 2025 look for you, mate? Obviously, I was recovering from your poor back.
Yeah, a lot of lying around. Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, a bit more recording, trying to get this record done. But I'm also part of what I do these days. One of the big decisions I made when I was away was because I work in the film industry as well. I'm concentrating on my screenwriting, which is another part of my life. You know, I have the music on one side of things, but I'm also a screenwriter on the other side of things. So I'm working on a couple of movies at the moment, one of which is getting made in Australia
Oh,
next year.
cool.
I'm just going through the final drafts of the script, and we're about to get to a shooting script. So yeah, that's another massive part of my life, and that's all involving. It's even more involving than the music in lots of ways. You know, that's a lots and lots of hours. That is, but I love it, and it's something I can do. You know, in between, and actually having the two things is great. If I'm getting a bit bored of doing the screenwriting, I can go and do a bit of music, and vice versa. You know, yeah.
Nice one, man. Well, Toby, it's been great to catch up with you, man. This is a great record. You know, as we speak, it'll now be released Friday the 8th of November. At the beginning of the interview, I'm going to play along with you because it is the lead single of the record. But what other song from the record would you like us to play at the end of the?
Well, I think we've talked about it in the interview, so I'd love you to play "What Will It Take" because I think that is, at a push, it's probably my favourite track on the record. So very proud of it, and I'm really proud of the guys' performance. So yeah, and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah,
Brilliant. All right, mate. We'll lock that in. And as always, great to catch up with you, Toby, mate. Thanks for coming back.
no problem at all, Lee. Take care and see you again.
Yeah, see you soon, mate.